Keanu Reeves sat quietly at the corner table of the fast food restaurant, sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone. It had been a long day of meetings and promotional events, and he just needed a moment to himself. The last thing he expected was to overhear a conversation that would leave him questioning everything about his life. From the booth behind him, two boys, probably around 12 or 13, were talking animatedly. Keanu didn't pay them much attention at first, lost in his thoughts, but then one of them casually mentioned his name. "Hey, you know Keanu Reeves, that guy from The Matrix?" The other boy nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, I love him. He's like a hero. He's got this quiet, cool vibe, like he's always calm and collected, even when things are crazy." The first boy laughed. "Hero? More like he's just some old dude who gets lucky in action movies. He's probably just like any other actor. I bet he doesn't even care about his fans. He's probably all about the money and fame." Keanu froze. The words stung more than he expected. They weren't cruel, but they weren't flattering either. It was the kind of comment that made him feel like an enigma, someone the world looked at but no one truly understood. What was it like to be someone who people saw as a hero, yet others thought of as just another Hollywood face? Keanu couldn't help but wonder. He took another sip of his coffee, but this time it didn't taste as warm. It felt like everything around him, even the bustling sounds of the restaurant, faded away. Could these boys be right? Did people really see him as just another actor? Did he even care? Would you have been able to handle a moment like that? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Keanu Reeves wasn't your typical Hollywood star. While many celebrities thrived in the spotlight, he often sought refuge in its shadows. To the world, he was a famous actor known for iconic roles in The Matrix, John Wick, and countless other films that made him a household name. But behind the cameras and flashing lights, Keanu was someone different. Born in Beirut, Lebanon, and raised in Toronto, Canada, Keanu's early life wasn't an easy one. He had experienced the heartbreak of his parents' separation at a young age, which left him moving between cities, constantly trying to find stability. He'd often reminisce about his days in high school, when he was that awkward kid who never quite fit in. He wasn't the jock, the class clown, or the popular kid. He was just Keanu, quiet, introspective, and distant. It was that quiet nature that led him to pursue acting. As a young man, he didn't necessarily crave fame or fortune. What Keanu wanted was an escape, an opportunity to step into someone else's shoes, to live different lives that allowed him to forget his own. What started as a form of personal expression eventually turned into a career. He was an outsider who found peace on the stage. Over the years, Keanu became famous, but it wasn't the fame that mattered to him. He valued the deeper connections he made, those with directors, co-stars, and even the fans who came to appreciate his genuine nature. Keanu never let the world around him cloud his sense of self. Despite his rise to fame, he remained humble, even to a fault. He took public transportation, quietly gave away large portions of his earnings to charity, and avoided the media frenzy whenever possible. Yet, there was something deeper at play. Keanu had faced personal tragedies that most didn't know about. He lost his best friend, River Phoenix, far too soon, and he struggled with the sorrow of losing his infant daughter and the woman he loved, Jennifer Syme. These painful experiences shaped him into the man he was today, a man who kept his emotions close to his chest and rarely let others see his vulnerability. Keanu didn't look for recognition. He didn't want the fame to define him. But over time it did. The world saw him as the stoic action hero, the gentle soul with a mysterious aura. Little did Keanu know, the way the world viewed him was about to shift once again, starting with two boys in a fast food restaurant who had no idea he was listening. Would you see yourself as just a hero or something more if you were in Keanu's shoes? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to hit subscribe for more of Keanu's story. Keanu sat there pretending to focus on his phone, but his mind kept drifting back to the conversation he had overheard. The words of the two boys echoed in his head, replaying over and over. "He's just some old dude who gets lucky in action movies." The sting of it wasn't in the insult. It was in the underlying truth that these boys didn't see him the way he saw himself. He had always prided himself on being grounded, never allowing fame to warp his perspective. But now, sitting there in that bustling fast food restaurant, surrounded by strangers, he felt a wave of doubt wash over him. Who was Keanu Reeves to them? Was he just another actor, like the countless faces that flashed across the screen every day? Was that all he was? A man who played roles, but had no true significance beyond that. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that what bothered him wasn't just the boys' casual dismissal of his work. It was the feeling that maybe they were right. Was he merely a product of Hollywood? A man who lived in the limelight but had no real impact on the world outside of the screen? As Keanu sat there, lost in his thoughts, he noticed one of the boys, probably the one who had defended him, glancing in his direction. Keanu quickly looked down, hoping to avoid making eye contact, but it was too late. The boy's face shifted from casual indifference to wide-eyed realization. "Wait. Is that him?" the boy whispered, nudging his friend. The other boy turned, squinting at Keanu as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Keanu Reeves?" The second boy's voice was full of disbelief. Keanu felt his stomach drop. He didn't want to be recognized, not like this. It was one thing to be seen, as the quiet guy in the corner, minding his own business. It was another to be thrust into the spotlight at a moment like this, when his own self-image felt so fragile. Trying to stay calm, Keanu took another sip of his coffee, but the tension in the air was palpable now. The two boys were whispering frantically to each other, clearly debating whether or not to approach him. Keanu half smiled to himself, feeling a sense of discomfort rise in his chest. He couldn't help but wonder, how would they see him now? After hearing what they had said about him, would they even care? Would they still view him as their hero, or was he just another celebrity in their eyes, someone who had let fame cloud his humanity? Suddenly the first boy stood up, taking a deep breath as if gathering the courage to speak. He looked at Keanu, his eyes wide with a mix of admiration and awkwardness. Excuse me. Are you Keanu Reeves?" the boy asked hesitantly. Keanu took a deep breath and looked up from his coffee. His heart raced a little. This was it, the moment where everything he had been quietly questioning would be put to the test. Would he reveal the doubts that had begun to form, or would he continue playing the role of the calm, collected hero? What would you do in this moment? Would you face the truth of how you're seen by others, or would you play it off? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more as we follow Keanu's journey. Keanu took a deep breath, meeting the boy's eyes. For a moment, the world around him seemed to slow down. The bustling noise of the fast food restaurant, the chatter of other customers, even the hum of the kitchen, it all faded into the background. It was just him and this boy standing awkwardly in the middle of an unexpected encounter. "Yeah," Keanu replied with a calm smile, though inside he was still feeling the effects of their earlier conversation. "That's me." The boy's face lit up with excitement, his earlier discomfort forgotten in an instant. "Oh my God, I can't believe it's really you," he exclaimed. His friend, still sitting in the booth, gaped at Keanu with wide eyes, a mixture of awe and surprise written across his face. Keanu chuckled softly. "I'm not sure if I'm really that exciting to meet, but I'm happy to say hello." For a brief moment, Keanu felt the familiar weight of his public persona, the one that people often expected him to maintain, the calm, composed Keanu Reeves they saw on screen. But now, sitting in this quiet corner of a fast food restaurant, he wasn't sure if that image was something he even wanted to hold on to anymore. He was just a person, like anyone else, with his own doubts and fears. The boys, realizing they were probably making Keanu feel uncomfortable, quickly offered an apology. "Sorry if we were talking too loudly," the first boy said. "We didn't mean to offend you. We love your movies. You're awesome, man." Keanu smiled again, trying to put them at ease. "It's all right. I've heard worse, trust me." He paused, then added with a little more sincerity, "Thank you, though, I appreciate that." For a moment, the three of them stood there in an awkward silence, unsure of what to say next. Keanu glanced around the restaurant, his mind wandering back to the conversation the boys had been having. The second boy finally spoke, his voice a little quieter now. "You know, when I said you were just some old dude, I didn't mean it like that," the boy said. "I guess I always see you as this perfect person, but maybe I was wrong. I mean, you're just like anyone else, and that's cool." The words hit Keanu harder than he expected. There was something oddly refreshing about the honesty of the boy. He had expected to hear more praise, more adulation, but instead, the boy was offering a raw, genuine insight into how he viewed Keanu, not as a hero, but as a real person. Keanu nodded slowly. "You're right, I'm just a person. No one's perfect. We all have our struggles." The boy seemed to brighten at that response. "Yeah, that's true. I guess it's easy to think of celebrities as untouchable, you know? But you're just like us in a lot of ways." Keanu's mind started to shift. For so long, he had kept himself distant from the world, isolated from the idea that his fans truly saw him for who he was beneath the persona. He had always believed that fame had a way of alienating you from reality, and that might still be true in many ways. But in this moment, sitting here with these two boys who had just shown him their own vulnerability, he realized something. It wasn't about the fame. It wasn't about being seen as perfect. It was about being human, and in that, there was a kind of connection that went beyond superficiality. As Keanu sat back and listened to the boys chat more excitedly about his movies, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He hadn't planned on this encounter when he walked into the restaurant. In fact, he hadn't planned on much of anything lately. But maybe that was the point. Life wasn't meant to be a perfectly crafted narrative. It was messy, unpredictable, and full of surprises. And sometimes it was in those unpredictable moments that you found the most important truths about yourself. Have you ever had an unexpected encounter that changed your perspective? How did it make you see things differently? Share your experience in the comments and make sure you hit subscribe for more of Keanu's story. The minutes passed, and Keanu found himself fully immersed in the conversation with the two boys. It was a rare moment where he felt like he could just be himself. No pressure, no expectations, no cameras, just a couple of kids and an actor talking like old friends. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just another ordinary encounter. The boy who had initially apologized, Jake, was now talking excitedly about his favorite scenes from John Wick. "Man, when you killed those guys with a pencil, that was the most insane thing I've ever seen," Jake said with wide eyes. "You were unstoppable, like a superhero, but more real, you know?" Keanu smiled, enjoying the energy in Jake's voice. "Well, I had some pretty good fight choreography, and I can't deny the pencil was a fun weapon," he replied, trying to keep the conversation light. But it was the second boy, Liam, who suddenly spoke up, his voice quiet but serious. "I don't know if you know this, but you mean a lot to some of us. Not just because of your movies, but because of who you are. I read this story once, about how you gave up so much of your salary to make sure other people got paid. And you're always so humble. Even though you could have been like all the other celebrities, you never got caught up in that fame game." Keanu felt a lump form in his throat. He had heard these types of stories before, of course, but hearing them from a young person, someone who looked up to him not for his fame but for his integrity, felt different. There was something about Liam's words that struck a chord deep within him. The way the boy viewed him wasn't about the movie, roles or the action scenes. It was about the essence of who Keanu was beyond the screen. And that truth felt more powerful than any performance or paycheck. "I never really thought of it that way," Keanu said, his voice softer now. "I guess for me it's always been about doing the right thing. You know, when you've been through as much as I have, you realize that the things that matter most aren't the things people see on the outside. It's the stuff you do when no one's watching." Liam looked at him, his expression serious, but there was a warmth to it, an understanding. "Yeah, I think that's why people love you, Keanu. You're not just an actor. You're like proof that you can still be a good person, even when the world tries to tell you to be something else." Keanu felt a lump in his throat that he couldn't swallow. He hadn't realized how much those words would resonate with him. He'd spent so many years thinking that he had to keep the world at arm's length, that he had to remain the stoic, almost untouchable figure the media had painted him as. But in this moment, in this small, unexpected exchange, he saw that being good didn't have to mean being perfect. It meant being real. It meant connecting with people on a human level, even when you were just a guy sitting in a fast food restaurant trying to enjoy a coffee. As the conversation continued, Keanu found himself opening up more than he had in years. He told the boys about his struggles, about losing loved ones, about the pain of never truly feeling at home anywhere, even in his own skin. It was the kind of vulnerability he hadn't shared with anyone in a long time, and yet it felt surprisingly freeing. The boys listened intently, their eyes wide with empathy. They didn't judge him. They didn't see him as a movie star. They saw him as a person who had walked through pain and perseverance and had come out the other side with wisdom to share. For the first time in a long while, Keanu felt like he wasn't just an image, a persona, or a character. He was just a man, flawed, real, and more connected to these boys than he could have imagined. As the conversation wound down, Jake stood up and gave Keanu a hesitant thumbs up. "I don't think we'll ever forget this," he said with a grin. "Thanks for talking to us. You really are a hero, you know." Keanu chuckled softly, a sincere smile on his face. "No," he said, shaking his head gently. "I'm just a guy who's doing his best." Keanu had started his day as a man lost in his thoughts, questioning his purpose and place in the world. But after this encounter, he realized something. True, connection wasn't about fame or even success. It was about being human and embracing the vulnerability that comes with it. Have you ever found a piece of yourself in someone else's story? What does it mean to be real in a world full of facades? Leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more of Keanu's journey as he learns that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who dare to be human. As Keanu walked out of the fast food restaurant, he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The encounter with the boys had been nothing short of eye-opening. He had come into that place expecting only a quick, solitary break from his busy life, but instead he'd left with something far more valuable: perspective. He stepped into the crisp afternoon air, feeling the weight of the world, the cameras, the expectations, and the roles he played slowly lifting off his shoulders. The two boys had given him something he didn't know he needed, a reminder that being real was far more important than being perfect. It wasn't about the image that others had of him, but about the connection he could foster by simply being authentic. Keanu wasn't sure if the boys fully realized the impact their words had on him. They were just kids, after all. But in their innocent honesty, they had helped him understand something profound. They had reminded him that even the smallest, most unexpected moments could teach us something about who we truly are. As he made his way down the street toward his car, Keanu thought back to all the years he had spent trying to define himself in the eyes of others. He had worked tirelessly to maintain a certain image, a certain level of mystery and stoicism. But today, for the first time in a long while, he realized that perhaps he had been chasing the wrong thing. He didn't need to be the perfect actor or the flawless celebrity. He didn't need to have all the answers or be a hero. What mattered was the way he showed up for people, the way he treated those around him with kindness, authenticity, and humility. This revelation wasn't just about his relationship with the boys, it was about his entire life. Keanu thought about the many times he had isolated himself, refusing to let people in for fear of being misunderstood or exposed. But today, he had let his guard down, shared a bit of his truth, and in return he had received a gift, one that couldn't be bought or manufactured. He had been reminded that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but a bridge to real, meaningful connections. Later that evening, as Keanu sat in the quiet of his home, he couldn't help but reflect on the lessons he had learned from his impromptu encounter with Jake and Liam. He realized that the idea of being a hero wasn't just about performing grand heroic acts. It wasn't even about being admired from afar. True heroism was in the small everyday actions, the way you treated others, the honesty you brought to every conversation, and the courage it took to stay true to who you were, even when the world around you expected something different. Keanu Reeves had spent years trying to define himself by the roles he played on screen. But today he had learned that the most important role he could ever play was simply being himself. As he sat there in the peace of his home, he thought about the boys one more time. He couldn't help but smile at the thought that, for once, it wasn't the fans who needed him to be something bigger than life. It was him who needed them to show him what it meant to be real. Life is full of surprises, and sometimes we need to be reminded that we're not alone in our struggles or in our search for meaning. Keanu had walked into that fast food restaurant expecting nothing more than a quiet moment. But he left with something far more meaningful, a connection that would stay with him for years to come. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment that changed your perspective on life? What does it mean to be real in a world full of expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe to continue following Keanu's journey and the lessons he's learned along the way. The days that followed Keanu's unexpected encounter at the fast food restaurant were quieter than usual. In the weeks since, he couldn't stop thinking about the boys, Jake and Liam, and the raw honesty they had shared with him. Their simple yet profound words had altered his mindset in ways he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just a conversation, it was a reminder of what truly mattered in life: connection, authenticity, and vulnerability. Keanu found himself more present in his day-to-day life. He began to engage more meaningfully with people, whether it was with the crew on set, his friends, or even complete strangers. For the first time in years, he stopped worrying so much about how he was perceived, focusing instead on how he could truly show up for others. He found himself smiling more, laughing more, and simply being more himself. And as for the boys, well, Keanu had been thinking about them often. They were part of a generation that had grown up with his movies, but, more importantly, they represented a generation that understood the power of empathy and authenticity in a world that often demanded perfection. Keanu knew that the world needed more people like Jake and Liam, people who didn't shy away from the truth, who didn't feel the need to put up walls, but instead embraced the messiness of being human. One evening, as Keanu sat at home reflecting on everything he had learned, he realized something important. Life wasn't about avoiding pain or mistakes, but about learning from them and growing. The moment with the boys had shown him that it was okay to be imperfect. It was okay to be vulnerable, and sometimes the most impactful lessons in life came from the most unexpected places. Keanu decided to take action. He didn't want this experience to fade away as just a fleeting moment. He wanted to honor it. So he wrote a letter, not to anyone in particular, but to everyone who needed to hear it. It was a letter about vulnerability, about embracing the flaws that made us who we are, and about being kind to one another. Keanu hoped that in some small way, his words might inspire others to embrace their own authenticity, just as he had learned to do. As he finished writing the letter, he felt a sense of peace. This was the message he wanted to share with the world, not just as an actor, but as a human being. And now Keanu turned to you, the reader, the viewer, the fellow traveler on this journey through life. He wanted to know, what will you take away from this story? What lessons have you learned along the way? How will you approach your own connections with others in a world that often demands perfection? Keanu's journey was far from over. It was only just beginning, and just like him, you too have the opportunity to embrace the raw, beautiful reality of being human. So what will you do? Will you continue to chase the perfect image that the world wants you to be? Or will you embrace your true self and let your connections with others define you? Share your thoughts below, and let's continue this conversation together. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've enjoyed following Keanu's journey. Let's keep exploring the powerful lessons that life has to offer, one story at a time. Weeks passed since that unforgettable day at the fast food restaurant, and Keanu's life seemed to have taken on a new rhythm. He wasn't sure exactly when it happened, but he felt like a different person now. He found himself in quieter moments, reflecting on the people he'd met, the lessons he'd learned, and how he could continue to evolve in a world that was constantly pushing for something more polished, more perfect. Something had shifted in him, a deep awareness that he didn't need to live up to any external standard. His real self, flaws, scars and all, was enough. He had spent so many years living for others' expectations, believing that if he could just maintain the right image, people would admire him, or even love him. But that experience with the two boys had shown him that what truly mattered was how we treat others, how we show up, and how we learn to accept ourselves in our imperfections. Keanu thought back to the moment when Liam had said, "You're like proof that you can still be a good person, even when the world tries to tell you to be something else." That comment lingered in his mind, like an anchor that kept him grounded. As the world around him continued to swirl with its usual noise and distractions, in some ways, he felt as though the conversation with Jake and Liam had become a kind of turning point in his life. The world wasn't as intimidating as it once seemed. Instead, he could approach it with kindness, authenticity, and understanding. Maybe it was all the small moments, the people he met, the lessons he learned, that had helped him start seeing things differently. Keanu began to think about how he could share this new perspective. He didn't want to go on a crusade to change the world, but he wanted to be a part of a conversation that emphasized the value of real human connections. He wanted to remind people, including himself, that it's okay to feel lost sometimes, to be vulnerable, to make mistakes. In a world that constantly glorified the image of perfection, Keanu now understood the power of letting go of that ideal and simply being human. It was an odd feeling, but Keanu realized that his fame had, in some ways, served as a double-edged sword. It had given him the platform to influence others, but it also kept him at a distance. The boys had shown him how the simplest gestures, the most genuine expressions of humanity, could create lasting, powerful impacts. It wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about living authentically and leaving a positive imprint on others' lives. The ripple effect of this realization was much greater than Keanu had imagined. He started connecting with more fans in a deeper way, responding to their messages with more care, speaking openly in interviews about his vulnerabilities, and sharing more about his personal journey. It wasn't easy. It felt like a raw exposure at times, but he found that the more he allowed himself to be vulnerable, the more the world responded with kindness. People weren't looking for a perfect, untouchable hero. They were looking for someone who felt like they understood what it was like to be real. In turn, Keanu felt something else, something unexpected. He felt more connected to the world than he ever had before. And just when he thought his story with Jake and Liam was coming to an end, the universe surprised him once again. One morning, Keanu woke up to a message on his social media accounts. It was a picture of the two boys, Jake and Liam, standing together in front of a school, holding a sign that read, "Be real, be kind, be you." The post had gone viral. Hundreds of thousands of people had shared it, commenting on how it had inspired them to be more authentic in their own lives. Jake and Liam had become advocates for kindness and authenticity, using their platform to encourage others to embrace vulnerability and to be unapologetically themselves. Keanu smiled as he stared at the photo on his phone screen. He couldn't help but feel proud. He had touched their lives, yes, but in a way they had changed his life too. The ripple effect had gone further than he could have ever imagined. Now it was your turn. In a world where we often try to appear perfect, how can you embrace your true self? How can you bring authenticity, vulnerability, and kindness into your everyday interactions? The story is never truly over. It's a cycle, a continuous journey of self-discovery and connection. Keanu's story reminds us all that it's okay to be imperfect, that our flaws and struggles don't diminish our worth. They make us human. So what will you do with that knowledge? How will you change the way you connect with the people around you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, if this story has inspired you, hit subscribe to keep following along. The journey toward authenticity and connection has just begun. Months had passed since that chance meeting with Jake and Liam, and in many ways, Keanu's life had transformed in subtle yet profound ways. He had shared more of his journey with the world, embraced his true self, and found a deeper connection to both the people around him and the quiet spaces within. And yet, as he reflected on everything that had transpired, he couldn't help but realize that the moment he had once thought was just a random encounter had in fact set off a ripple effect that reached far beyond what he could have ever imagined. Keanu's journey had taken him places he never thought he'd go, not through action scenes, blockbuster movies, or the fame that accompanied them, but through the raw and simple act of being real, of sharing who he was, flaws and all. He thought back to the boys in the fast food restaurant, how, without them even realizing it, They had reminded him of something so important, the importance of connecting to others, not as a figure of perfection but as a human being in all his complexity. That afternoon, as Keanu sipped his coffee in his favorite quiet corner of his home, he was deep in thought. The days were busy, yes, with work and commitments, but something inside him had shifted. The small moments, the kind interactions, the honest conversations, the shared experiences, had become far more meaningful to him than any movie or public appearance. He no longer wanted to just be the actor that people admired. He wanted to be someone who made a lasting difference in people's lives, who taught others by simply being real. Keanu thought back to the post that had gone viral, the one with Jake and Liam standing proudly in front of their school. That simple sign, "Be real, be kind, be you," had resonated with so many people, and Keanu knew that the boys, in their own way, had become the heroes of this story. They had inspired not only themselves but countless others who had been touched by their message of kindness and authenticity. As Keanu stood up to leave, a soft smile crossed his face. He knew that his connection with those boys would be a story he would carry with him for the rest of his life. It wasn't just about how they had made him feel, how they had sparked something in him. It was about the lessons they had taught him without even realizing it. He stepped outside, into the world that continued to spin around him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it all with a sense of peace and purpose. The pressure of being perfect, of constantly maintaining an image, seemed so far away. What mattered now was showing up for the people who mattered most and, perhaps even more importantly, showing up for himself. Keanu didn't have all the answers. He still faced his challenges and his moments of doubt. But what he had learned over the past few months was that the strength to move forward came from embracing his true self and allowing that authenticity to guide his path. And so he made a promise to himself. He would continue to live his life with more kindness, more openness, and more honesty. He would use his platform to remind others of the power of connection and vulnerability. He would no longer hide behind a carefully crafted image. He would let the world see the real Keanu Reeves, the human, the imperfect, the ever-evolving person who was doing his best every day. And now, the story comes full circle. You, the reader, the viewer, have shared in this journey with Keanu. You've walked alongside him from that quiet moment in the fast food restaurant to the lessons he's learned about authenticity, vulnerability, and kindness. But now it's your turn to reflect on your own life. How will you embrace the idea of being real? How will you show up for others and for yourself? Will you choose authenticity over perfection? Keanu's story was a reminder to all of us that in a world full of expectations, we each have the power to define who we are. Your story is just as important. As you go through your own journey, remember, it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to not have all the answers. But the most important thing you can do is to stay true to yourself and treat others with kindness and empathy. So let's continue this conversation together. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts. How have you been inspired to embrace your true self, and how can we support each other in living more authentically? And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to keep following stories of growth, vulnerability, and connection. Keanu's journey is far from over, but the journey is really just beginning for all of us. Let's keep learning, growing, and being real.